Hello, everyone. Walter Bosley here on the Walter Bosley channel. And I want to thank you all. I'm having a bit of a delay, so this is going to be weird for me. Let me. Hold on. This is a new one. This hasn't happened. So let me tell my tech genius guru. Oh, wait, I just heard her phone in here. I'm going to run out of the room. I'll be right back, you guys. Look at the nice picture of the Cliff House in San Francisco. Oh, yeah. There's a weird audio delay, and I'm hearing it. Like I say something, and then I self say it. Yeah. Hey, everyone, and I am live.
Yeah. Let me hear.
Okay. So,
Go ahead and talk.
we are here for the special Monday edition of the Walter Bosley channel.
Pause.
I'm pausing.
All right. I know what's going on. Turn that off.
Go ahead and just click out of it.
Yep.
Okay. Did that seem to do it?
No.
Oh,
Pardon everyone. Let's see if we can.
that's
get this
okay.
figured out.
This is a new one. We've never had this particular one happen before, so.
No. All right. Okay. Try again.
Well, I'm trying again. As you can see, we're here on Monday afternoon because yesterday was.
Stop. Pause. I know what's happening. Ha ha ha!
We
got
have it
figured
solved.
out, and there you go.
Oh, what was it?
All better. Just a background echo.
Oh, okay. All right, folks, I'm back with you. As you see, we're making tremendous improvements around here, and in the course of improvements, you're going to have to make adjustments for, potential glitches. So, my technical stream master tells me everything's good, right?
We're
Okay.
good to go.
Okay.
Great. 5 by 5.
5x5. Haven't heard that one in a while.
Drop that mic.
Hey. Okay. So, again, we weren't able to be live yesterday because of a major annual national event here in the US of A. And I just figured, let's just be prudent and do this on Monday, but it gives you something to look forward to. My guest today, you guys, I'm really excited about, okay? A few years ago, a couple of years back now, he sent me a copy of one of his books, and he has several I want to add. And you guys have heard me talk about it. It's this one right here, Flaming Telepaths, Imaginos Expanded and Specified. And I got to tell you, this book really. Oh, okay. Sorry, I was looking at a message on screen. This book really grabbed me, and continues to do so, because the more I go back and look at it, the more I see. In other words, the more that I learn about really the category that I place this in, and that's occult social alchemy, the more powerful I think the book is, and the more I want to learn about it. So naturally, when I finally started having guests here at the Walter Bosley channel, Martin Popoff was like one of the first three people I thought of. Let me tell you a little bit about Martin before I bring him on here. Martin has written about 100 books on the rock music scene, specifically the metal scene, okay? And those of us with sufficiently gray beards know how significant that is to popular modern music history. He was editor-in-chief of Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles. This was Canada's long-running metal music magazine. For 14 years, that magazine was the source, okay? He has made contributions to several music scene publications, including Guitar World, Revolver, and also online music sites devoted to heavy metal rock music. Martin has contributed to music history through documentary films, award-winning documentary films like Rush, Beyond the Lighted Stage, and several series for VH1, okay? I don't know about you guys, but I tend to have really loved those series that you would see on VH1. It's just some of the best information out there. And probably you've seen more than one of Martin's series that he has made. He's a member of the Contrarians on YouTube. Martin also hosts the podcast History in 5 Songs on Pantheon. And he's a graduate of the University of Victoria and earned his MBA from McMaster University. One of the things I found fascinating about his work is his work on what he calls, basically it's the 3 stages of metal rock. That's invention, reinvention, and re-intensification. And if you look closely at that, and you've been around, sufficiently graybeard enough, you'll look at those stages and you'll go, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now today, I've got him on here to really dig into the things filtered to us through the music of Blue Oyster Cult. Okay, specifically, he wrote a book, Agents of Fortune, which I know I need to grab and read that. And that's on the history of Blue Oyster Cult. And also Imaginos Flaming Telepaths, the book that I have here, and we're going to be getting into. So, yes, I'm going to shut up soon and be asking Martin questions. So let's bring him in now so that we can get him in here to explain things that I don't begin to understand. So let me see. Martin?
Yes.
Are you there?
I'm here, and I can see you fine.
I see you. Martin, welcome to my show. I have to say that, I've had some, so far, I've just gotten started on this having guests thing, and I've had some really cool and big names in this community. But as far as the greater world out there goes, you're the biggest one I've had yet, because you do your thing out there in the music world, and your credentials are just outstanding. And what I dragged you in here for is the Flaming Telepaths book. So if I got anything wrong in your bio, feel free to correct it right now. I don't know if that was dated info.
That's pretty much right. I mean, I guess it's 115 books at this point, but
Oh, wow.
I mean,
was
that,
off.
that bio. I mean, this is our intersection. This is the only book I've got out of all those where there is the intersectionality with your world. So,
Well, I want more.
I've got your books. I've got a couple here in the office and a few more at home, and so it's a pleasure.
Yeah, I definitely want more. I'm just going to, I'm going to jump right in, but I'm going to ask you to tell, the folks here watching, how did you come to writing this book? What pulled you into specifically the Flaming Telepaths Imaginos world?
Well, so this is a band that I've always. So I did write that standard book on the band, that Agents of Fortune, and a big coffee table book, which is this one here with, this is all full color throughout, pictures of the band and all that. But so yeah, it actually was the previous version of Agents of Fortune was one of the first books I ever wrote on a band. And basically, this is a band that most people in our field think have the greatest lyrics of all time, the greatest album covers of all time, song titles. It's just super interesting stuff, right? And the reason that they're such an interesting band is that we'll get into the whole Imaginos thing, and Sandy Pearlman as manager and creator of the original text, etc. But they've always had this this sort of cabal of great lyricists. John Shirley writes a lot of their lyrics now, science fiction author, right? Richard Meltzer's a writer. Patti Smith is a famous person, of course. She's written a bunch of lyrics. So the lyrics have always been really interesting along the way, and they've had a lot to do. So there is this Imaginos thing that we'll get into, which is sort of like a concept album that's kind of broken up over time through the albums. But they love their UFOs. They love their science fiction. They love their biker gangs. The whole philosophy of rock and roll. Sandy Pearlman was an actual prof later in life, and he has, his whole treatises. I don't think he ever he's passed on a few years ago. I don't think he ever did an actual full book on this, but he has this whole history of hard sounds that goes back to classical and Berlioz and Bruckner and Wagner and all this, and distorted, horn sounds, and so this all leads into the birth of this band, the Blue Oyster Cult, which comes from, again, this literary bent of his. He was one of the first guys to ever write, in the rock journalism field with Crawdaddy, and so he put this band together and had the name and the concept, and now what are we going to do with these five guys? So it's just, I guess, to answer your question, it's just a super interesting band with super interesting lyrics.
Oh, absolutely. Of course, everyone is familiar with the all-time classic "Don't Fear the Reaper," and that, I mean, that has, for the last several years, had a lot more, even more meaning to me in recent years, due to my research having to do with Hecate and what lies beyond when we die, and the whole idea that I'm toying with recently of time travel through reincarnation, and what Hecate and the Reaper actually represent, and all this. But not a lot of I wasn't familiar with the Imaginos storyline, as it were, until you sent the book. Now, Sandy Pearlman, he's an interesting guy. When I looked at him a little bit, what jumped out at me was, of course, he had handpicked the musicians who would become Blue Oyster Cult. And in fact, he handpicked them to tell this Imaginos mythos that he created, is my understanding. And I thought it was interesting that one of their early names was Oaxaca, the interesting city in Mexico, which, by the way, if you've ever been a tourist down there, folks, they're really into the Dia la Muerta, the Day of the Dead, which is interesting that one of the band's early names was Oaxaca. But what really jumped out at me was that he had a professorship, some type of association with McGill University, and McGill University has a long history with MK Ultra and Ewan Cameron and things like that. But tell us about Sandy Pearlman, because you knew him.
Yeah, so I'm not so sure that he literally put this band together, more or less. I mean, they would have been a band, I suppose, without him. But the idea was he was the manager. He came up with the name of the band. They also had Stock Forest Group, Soft White Underbelly. One of the ironies is his name is Sandy Pearlman, so Pearlman, and here they are, Blue Oyster Cult, right? But he came up with pseudonyms for all the band. Like, this was going to be part of this mythos that he was creating, and it definitely, this Imaginos thing is a mythos because it's very related to the Cthulhu thing, the whole Lovecraft thing. So so the idea was to and he believed in sort of the dark power and just general power of rock and roll, the free Altamont concert, and that the dark vibes and the energy of the guy getting murdered in front of the stage and all that stuff was sort of part of this as well. The Doors, these guys were all Doors fans. They were a little Grateful Dead-y in the beginning, but what happened was, when they got their deal, they were getting on with Columbia Records, and Columbia wanted to have their own version of Black Sabbath. Warner Brothers had Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath was a hit right out of the gates, and it's like, oh, we need a spooky band like Black Sabbath, sort of thing. So this is where this thing sort of grew up, and it got really sort of mythical and cool. And just to show you, so the here's the album cover of their third album, and it's called Tyranny and Mutation, right? And it's got the V's instead of the U's in the Blue Oyster Cult and stuff. So right off the bat, and he grew up in Lovecraft country. There's the whole Miskatonic thing, and they're in Stony Brook. RISD is sort of part of the whole domain here. Long Island, they're a Long Island band. Albert and Joe are from upstate New York, which has its own spookiness and the whole, the history of spiritualism and all that. But even right from the album covers, so this Bill Golick character who promptly disappeared after doing these album covers, and interviews with all the guys over all the years, they cannot tell you what happened to this guy. They lost track of him about 1972, but he came up, he'd sit in this cold tower at university, and he'd come up with these things based on somewhat based on the the City of the Future, Albert Speer and all that. And it said that he came up with the Blue Oyster Cult logo, which has been, variously considered, does it have to do with Saturn, Kronos, spelt with a CH or a K? What does it have to do with alchemy? Sandy loved the whole alchemical thing as well. So just to give you the building blocks then. So around 1967, he came up with this storyline called The Soft Doctrines of Imaginos, with 2 M's. And so there were a bunch of notes, like no one's really seen too much of this, but essentially what they were used for the building blocks of what they would do throughout these albums, and what I used as a springboard for that book, is he eventually came up with a handful of lyrics. I don't know, 6 to 20 lyrics kind of thing, like just pieces of lyrics. They would sit in a binder on like an amplifier and stuff, and if somebody in the band had a music track and they were at a loss for lyrics and they weren't working with Richard Meltzer or Patti Smith or something, or they didn't want to write them themselves, they would wander over to this book of lyrics and pick an Imaginos lyric. So you know how bands do concept albums. Well, this is a band that just inexplicably, once in a while, 1 song here, 2 songs here, 2 songs here, 5 songs later, there'd be like an Imaginos theme lyric, and it would drive the fans wild because it's like, what is this crazy story? What are they talking about in this? It just doesn't have a context against all these, here's a UFO song, and here's a love song, and they love their vampire songs too, lots of those, right? So they would just show up a little bit over time, and then, not to jump forward too far, but in 1988, they finally did an Imaginos album.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And it seems like that from that, but with my look at it, it seems like they did even more of the Imaginos mythos after after 1988, correct? Starting in 1988. It seems like it was expressed more.
Yes, that would be accurate. So along the way, there would have been, I don't know how many, 10-ish Imagino songs throughout those first 6, 7, 8 albums. And I believe,
Hmm.
yeah, is it the first? Hang on. Anyways, one of these black and white period albums has no Imagino songs on it. See, here's another one of their album covers. The album covers are just so cool, right? You know, the
Hmm.
ME 262 there, and the
Yeah.
Eric is in
Yeah.
a cape, and the dogs, and then the tie-in with the Process Church and all that, and the dogs have
Right.
a head on the back, they're slaughtered, right? So yeah, lots of mystery, but so yeah, you're right about that. So by 1988, so put it this way, by 1982, Albert Bouchard, the drummer who is the most interested in the Imaginos saga, he's
Sure.
kicked out of the band, and he wants to do Imaginos as a double album,
Right.
and doesn't ever get around to it. It's still a thing to this day that the label didn't like Albert singing, and we don't want a solo album from you, especially not a double album with this crazy story. So
Right.
so they started working on this, and he was aligned with Sandy for from sort of 82 through to 88. 88 rolls around. They put out this dog's breakfast of an album where there's all these guest players, and the song order gets muddled, and the production's up and down. It's only a single album. They get the band back together sort of to sing on it, but Albert's never really back in the band. But it's put out as a Blue Oyster Cult album, and it frustrated all the fans because no one really liked it that much. It tried to be heavy for heavy's sake. They redid a song and retitled it. Subhuman was redone and retitled as Blue Oyster Cult. How imaginative is that, right? Astronomy was redone, their old classic. But then after that, well, actually, even before that, and not particularly after that, but there's still one or two little songs dotting the landscape throughout Blue Oyster Cult albums. But then Albert Bouchard, very recently, decided, hey, I'm finally going to recognize this life's aim. He's I think he did the first one. He might have been 70 years old at this point now. So he did a solo album that he called Reimaginos, and it was him kind of reimagining what he would have expected the album to be in the proper order. Because like I say, in 88, it got muddled, and then they came up with this idea, well, it's a random access myth anyway. So that's fine that the label moved him around, right? So then he did Imaginos 2, Bombs Over Germany, parentheses, -0 and counting, I think it's called. So he's done now 2 of these Imaginos albums, and I think it's 2020 and 2022, I believe, and he's planning a third. But at this time, this is when I decided there's just not enough to this Imaginos story. It needs, as I say on the back cover, it needs the slathering of the mortar between the bricks to fill out this album, because everybody's frustrated that there's not enough of it. And you are definitely a big inspiration in the flights of fancy and the cool, the intellectual leaps that you make throughout your books. I love that sort of concept, and I thought speculative fiction, right? That's sort of the idea. I like the name you've come up with. What I've done here, that's even cooler. but no. So the idea was, Albert in particular didn't really even go that far in adding very much. But I thought, look, I'm just going to go crazy, and I'm going to add a lot, because not to get too far ahead of myself, but all he more or less left us with was, this is a story that explains the occult origins of World War I. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, it and that's where it really begins to blow me away, because you sent it to me and tipped me off that there had been this, which I'm very humbly flattered, because this has become increasingly resonant with some work and threads I'm pulling with Todd Wood, a young guy that brought to me a very interesting concept. And we are doing this series of books, the Lost Future series, and we're kind of venturing into the same territory, the idea of the 20th century. having been a product of a social alchemy, starting in the 19th century directly. And, when I look through your book, increasingly as Todd and I are working on that particular thread, I keep using that because, it's just, how it is. You just pull threads and more stuff comes. Increasingly, every look at flaming telepaths seems to me to be just right on with the threads we started pulling. And your book, Flaming Telepaths, is actually one of the, I would say, 2 or 3 main resources that kind of started us on this concept of a lost future, that there was somebody out there doing occult shenanigans, as it were, on the collective psyche of not just America, not just the United States, North America, but the whole world, of course, particularly the whole Western world. And it's obvious that any one of us who pull those threads and are looking at these different things, we're all seeing a piece of the same big monster, I think. And that's what really strikes me about Flaming Telepaths. There's actually so much there that I couldn't put together a very, your typical linear type of discussion with this. There's just so much, that was why I'm going to kind of do a shotgun approach today, because I can tell you already, we haven't even done 30 minutes yet, and I'm going to have you back sometime when it, when it fits in your schedule, because this requires such a big conversation. But let me jump in, and I apologize if you guys are hearing an ice cream truck behind me. They unfortunately built 2 schools a block away from me, and all the students hang out on a corner up here, and the ice cream truck is there for about 20 minutes, driving us all mad.
Like what they put in the song "Flaming Telepaths."
Really?
Don't listen to it. They've got an ice cream truck in there, essentially.
Wow, really? Oh, okay.
Exactly like that.
Okay, well, I'm not going to come. So, folks, I'm not doing it. It's the ice cream truck guy outside. What an incredible synchronicity I think we're looking at there.
I think it's Flaming Telepaths. It might be astronomy. It's one of those. That's the other thing Blue Oyster Cult do. They do this transition between songs where they got no space between the songs on those early albums. It's really weird.
Oh, yeah, okay. I just listened to Astronomy about an hour ago, so I'll have to give that a listen again. Going back to Albert Bouchard, before we jump into some things I want to ask you about, what's interesting about him is, like you say, he went solo to do the Imaginos album that he never accomplished. But there are, let's see, is it songs or albums? I apologize for not noting this clearly. Incantation and Surrealist. These are titles of songs, correct? Over the years that he wrote.
Yeah, those aren't part of the Imagino saga. So he's got different albums that he had with his band, the Brain Surgeons.
Right.
The Imagino saga, so far, in terms of realized, is 2 single CDs. So
okay.
The 2020 album, and you've got the 2022 album, and they're mostly these songs. There's only the odd thing that is brought in that Blue Oyster Cult never recorded, like the girl.
Okay.
Blind.
Well, what I think what they reflect to me is what's on this guy's mind as an artist, as a creative person. Incantation, Surrealist, his involvement, of course, with Blue Oyster Cult, his fascination with the Imaginos thing. What kind of a guy is he? Is this right in line with some of his deeper interests?
He's a pretty intellectual guy, but he's also quite down to earth. I mean, this is really about extrapolating on what Sandy did and his love of having a concept album situation. But there's kind of a good point to bring up about Albert. So he's the drummer in a band, and drummers aren't usually considered songwriters, right? But
Right.
Albert was really important in that band. He wrote a lot of songs, he sang a lot of songs in the band, but
Mm-hmm.
there was just this crazy time at that time, and he had a girlfriend who was on the road, and he was difficult to deal with and whatnot. But it was more on a personal level, but also on a creative level, because he really did want the band to be more cerebral. So that was him kind of pushing that sort of thing. But it
Cool.
was just the love of this story of Sandy's that
Mm-hmm.
kept
Mm-hmm.
him going. And like I say, I mean, most of what you get on those albums are essentially the expanded version of these Imaginos songs that couldn't make it on the single album.
Sure.
But just to go back for a second, so I liked what you said about how there are these people, or there are these forces shaping history, because that's exactly what this is about. So
Mm-hmm.
this Imaginos is born as a modified child. There's lay invisible, the old ones, and so this is all kind of, that's where there's the real tie-in with Lovecraft. But
Yeah.
essentially, this guy is born, and let me just find so the one short phrase on the back of the actual Imaginos album that really gives you the in plain English what this is all about. It says, a bedtime story for the children of the damned. From a dream world paralleling our earth in time and space, the invisible ones, lay invisible, have sent an agent who will dream the dream of history. With limitless power, he becomes the greatest actor of the 19th century, taking on many ingenious disguises. He places himself at pivotal junctures in history, continually altering its course and testing our ability to respond to the challenge of evil. His name is Imaginos. So what I've got from so the only way you get to know more about this is through the lyrics or interviewing Sandy. Unfortunately, I interviewed Sandy a few times, probably more than most people,
Mm-hmm.
maybe more than anybody. But you get these little crumpets out of him, and that's where you get the idea that it explains the occult history of World War I, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where there's a problem, because there is an occult history of World War II. We all know that. It's pretty dark. I don't
Right.
even want to write about it very much, because you
Right.
could get in trouble writing about it. But there's really no occult history of World War I. And that's why I thought, with this thing, I'm going to bring in the synergy. I have to bring in the occultists. So that's why there's lots of Austin Osman Spare and Lovecraft, who's not an occultist. He's more, but that's a whole nother thing. With
Mm-hmm.
was he actually channeling truths as he writes these stories? But
Right.
there's Aleister Crowley. So I had to, because otherwise it's just these quasi nation states and monarchies, and the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and these guys writing letters back to each other, and ticking each other off with the tones of their letters, and not getting along, and all of a sudden
Right.
he gets executed by Gavrilo Princip, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his wife, and that drive-by, right?
Mm-hmm.
Echoes of the Kennedy thing, right? But so the point here is this guy, is he possessing these people? Is he becoming these people, or just like getting into their thoughts? But essentially, these big these big large seafood platter creatures who had
Mm-hmm.
fed them here, and they came from the stars, and they're living in the ocean. It's all the same sort of Lovecraft thing, right? But he
Mm-hmm.
is there. Affecting these wars and causing these wars to happen. Sandy, one of the things he says here is he's testing humankind, or a little bit of a Jesus thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus or Satan thing, right? But it's more like, I wanted to put him in the action as actually causing these things. So it really is a World War I story. And the last thing I want to say is that you say there's so much in here. So why was I able to do that? It's a trick. It's the timeline, right? When you do
Mm-hmm.
a timeline, I've done so many timeline books on just rock music stuff, and this
Mm-hmm.
is
Yes.
my 25th timeline book, probably, right? But the
Yeah.
point is when you do a timeline like that, that allows you to just pop stuff in. So there's stuff all over the place that I haven't adequately explained, but they're just there for you to ponder, like, why did he stick this in here, right? So that's what allows you to put a lot in when you don't have to link everything booky prosy, right?
But it sure does help. It helps you, see the bigger picture, that there's more there. When doing the Empire of the Wheel books, I was thinking in terms of starting at 1915, and for instance, with the Hecate veneration of the 100 years in splits of 50. Yeah, there we go. Oh wow. All right. Hey, I'm on Martin's shelf. Okay, cool. And then came the day where we were trying to figure out, well, what happened, that might be pertinent in this weird way, occult shenanigans way, 50 years before the San Bernardino working, as Rick Spence and I call it. And we came to what, 1865? The Lincoln assassination, Abraham Lincoln, and that one really jumped out at us like, oh wow. And that is what made me do the little timeline thing you're talking about that shows up in Empire of the Wolf 3. And you're absolutely right. It helps draw out the things that you're missing. But here's the thing: it's not just and I think you'll probably agree with this. It's not that you're just dropping random events in. By looking at the timeline, you're seeing the legitimately connected, associated, resonant events and actions and people. And that's the weird magic of the timeline that I think you're talking about. And that. And before I forget, one of the other things that jumped out at me about Albert Bouchard's name is I'm a great fan of the original series Dark Shadows. And what jumped out at me about that name is the legendary villain character, Angelique. Her last name, not mentioned too often on the show, is Bouchard. So she has the same A. Bouchard. And I thought that was interesting. I wondered if Albert was ever a Dark Shadows fan, back then.
One more quick note about timelines, Walter.
Yes.
The more you do them, the more you see some really cool things. Like I'm working now on a follow-up to this book, and for example, there was this thing where the fledgling Nazi Party executed like 7 dissident people who were, this is back in maybe the early 30s. I can't remember when this happened.
Yeah.
Right before that, but it happened on an April 30th, and then what happens later on April 30th? Adolf Hitler commits suicide, right? So that was, and there's a bunch of those in Flaming Telepaths where literally a few things are happening the same time in like 1784 or something, right? And so the more entries you put in, and as soon as you're popping those in, you're saying, whoa, this is happening right at the same time. And those are always really fun to find.
One of them, I'm glad you mentioned that. One of them that jumped out at me is, oh boy, let me see if I got it jotted down, but it's either Churchill or Crowley, who was born on the 12th of October. Is it Crowley? Yes, October 12th, 1875, Crowley is born. Isn't that interesting that Columbus Day was designated October 12th? So I jumped right on that, and I'm still not done doing the research, but I'm looking for any occult significance to the date 12 October, because it wouldn't surprise me that they would, set Columbus Day and all that the opening up of the Americas represents. And then it's interesting that Crowley would happen to have been born on that day. I just found that to be one of those interesting little resonances and synchronicities.
Something else I found is that, Crowley goes to America right after the Hudson dock fires, and then he's like down in Galveston, Texas, and there's a massive tornado or flood or something. I can't remember what it is. And then the Cliff House that features in this, there's nothing particularly occult about the Cliff House, but I drove, there we go. So I drew some comparisons with Sutro and Prussia and Delshaw and all that sort of stuff as well. But I believe how this works is that McKinley visits the Cliff House, and then he's assassinated in Buffalo shortly thereafter. So and then Crowley's travels, I recognized lined up with sort of Imaginos' travels. There's a trip. There's New Orleans. There's the whole Lovecraft country part of it. There's a New York City piece. There's Florida, Mexico, New Orleans, Haiti. Some the travel out west, the beer stuff that you've written about, right?
Yeah.
So there's all these little odysseys where there's these mapping things that go on, and then you inspired me on the whole ley line thing, right? right? And looking at, where this psychic terrorist Crowley goes, where are the ley lines associated to his travels and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I come away from my Empire of the Whale research with a much more sympathetic point of view on Aleister Crowley. What I knew about him going in was what everybody knows and assumes, and I came away. I'm still firm in my position that Aleister Crowley had nothing to do with the nefarious activities here. That he would have been appalled by them, particularly the murder of the children. And yet I have close friends and associates that they think I'm crazy. They think, oh, he was, behind it all. And I'm like, well, just have to disagree, agree to disagree on that one.
There's a part in this book where he's together with a high up British military person, Marsden. I can't remember his first name, but they actually do a working at one point. So Crowley might have caused World War I. So this is sort of the thing, right? So there's the idea of mixing in these occultists with this, like is Sandy challenging true reality as he writes this story? Was Lovecraft challenging true reality as Kenneth Grant, sort of,
right,
as everybody wants to believe, right? That it's truth and his creative mind is attuned to all this stuff, right? So this occultist thing, you've got Crowley involved in that, and all that stuff about is he a double agent or not. You've got Austin Osman Spare, who is a great occultist and a great artist. So creativity and occultism together, and he's also a World War I illustrator. Right. And there's also the crazy story that Hitler loved his art and wanted him to do his portrait, and Osman Spare just told him to take off. I'm not doing your portrait. And then later on in life, he shows up again in World War II. Austin Osman Spare sitting there surrounded by all his artwork in poverty. Yeah. He hasn't made it as an artist. And lo and behold, his place is literally bombed by the Germans. And it's like, wow, did Hitler kind of remember that grudge and figure out where he was? And right?
Yeah, so
these guys, there is that intersectionality of these occultist artists with the war. And that all ties together with Sandy being in love with all this stuff as well, and Lovecraft and others, including the Wild Ride. Is that the name of that painting? The one that Hitler based his image on?
The one featuring Wotan leading the other characters on their Wild Hunt. I believe it's the Wild Hunt.
Ride, the Wild Hunt, one of those. Anyways.
Yeah, the Wild Hunt, I think.
Yeah, but it's a German symbolist painting.
Yes.
Like Hitler, right? And then who else looks like Hitler? Austin Osman Spare kind of looks like Hitler, right?
Yeah. So, well, you talk about the early 19th century in Germans and bombings. Two things when you mention Galveston, Texas, in relation to Crowley's travels. Galveston is where Delschow entered the United States when he came from, what would become Germany, of course, when he came over in the 1850s. It wasn't that yet. But also, if I'm not mistaken, the version of the cliff house here behind me is the one that was blown up by the ship that had the dynamite in it, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, is this the one, or is this the one built after that?
Oh, I think there's really only... Oh, yeah, that's right. There is a different... Yeah, a ship runs into it.
Now, I find that suspicious. When I read that, I read it again. I'm like, there's something going on at that particular cliff house. That's just too suspicious to me. A ship, carrying dynamite, hits the cliff house and it blows up. I don't know. My mind immediately goes to what's really going on here. And that to me, that's a big thread to pull.
Yeah, and that area has its own very early UFO flap, and that area move into the woods, and this is apparently where these airships are getting built. That Delschow is illustrating, right?
Right.
So, and then it's just generally California. That again, I was inspired by you with that. I just love the whole California-ness of your whole story, right?
It's California-ness is something to behold at times, good or bad. So, and speaking of you're talking about that era and the airship mystery in the 19th century. You talk about in the book, you've got the Aero Club, you've got Bulwer Lytton's Vril, is part of this timeline, and Ambrose Bierce and Crowley, the Cliff House. You also see the resonance of Robert W. Chambers, The King in Yellow, a favorite topic of mine. And then there's the discussion of this figure, the Imperatrix, or the Empress. Now, of course, I couldn't help but interpret that figure as a Hecate figure. And these, of course, are all part of the timeline work that you did. Were you able to share your view of this, your timeline extrapolation of Sandy's work with Sandy, or what did he or Albert think of Flaming Telepaths?
No, Sandy died before I did this. I think we're talking 2015 for Sandy.
2016, I think, was the date that I saw.
Yeah, so this is after that. Albert, on the other hand, loves the book, and he used some of my illustrations that I made for it in his videos.
Cool.
And he also made sure that his comic book people had a copy of the book to pick out ideas as well. So I think there's apparently a comic book coming, but he liked it, and I've been a buddy of his for a lot of years. But yeah, he found it fairly illuminating as well. And I put a very recent interview with him in the back because I wanted to like pepper him for more stuff too. But as it turns out, he doesn't have or know all that much more than any of us do, and that's why this speculative idea comes up to fill in the gaps and figure out what Sandy was talking about. Because besides that one little quote on the back here, there's a longer story inside this album that lays out some stuff. But other than that, like I say, all we have is really the lyrics, and then anything he's managed to tell us in interviews and mention the odd thing he was into. But they would say, like, I know he was also into and this is why the second one's going to be a lot more about Operation Paperclip and nuclear bombs, and Russian cosmism, and getting that whole thing started, like the Russian program started with the wacky idea of cosmism, because Sandy loved the whole young scientist thing too. So he's big into that. But yeah, also big into the whole Lovecraft thing. So there's going to be more technology coming into the second one. And again, it's going to be, I'm going to be even a little firmer with the story. It's going to be more or less about Imaginos trying to get out of his job, causing evil, and try to go back to the planet that he's never been to because he was born as a modified child here. So it's going to be, and it's going to tie in more of, like I say, it's going to have a lot of Jack Parsons, so a lot more California, and Roger Molina and all that sort of stuff, and a lot more UFO stuff for sure, because I'm coming up with this idea that to figure out how to do this, he's going to need 3 pillars of disciplines. It's going to be human science, alien science, and the occult, and all of this. There's a sort of synergistic Vril component that might come from creative sorts, creative people, creativity, period, right? So mix creativity in with those 3 pillars, and he may be able to build a spaceship to fly home. That's sort of.
Oh, that's great. I'm telling you, Martin, you're into Robert Anton Wilson territory, because this is between what Sandy envisioned and where Albert Bouchard took it, and where you're taking it with your Flaming Telepaths and the follow-up book. I'm getting a vibe of the Sigismundo Celine novels that Robert Anton Wilson did. The Masonic saga, which argues, as my viewers and listeners hear me say all the time, do not disregard a fictional context, because sometimes that's the best glue you have to put together actual events, or at least an interpretation of actual events, sometimes that context. And so that's the way I look at the whole Imaginos thing that you talk about, Sandy envisioning and the continued attempt to explain it and extrapolate it further. It's using a fictional context to tell a true story. And this is, I think, all of this is a prime example of that. It's certainly a format, I really personally like and pay attention to. But
well, brings up the word egregore, right? So the idea
yes.
of being able to, collective consciously,
right,
will this into being from a fictional place, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like if we all think all this, we can make it real, sort of.
Yes.
Right? So,
Yeah.
so and that's what people want to have happen with Lovecraft stuff, right?
Oh, you're absolutely dead on there. People, yeah, exactly. How far back does your interest in these kinds of things go personally?
Like in temporal space, probably it was simmering for a long time. But with the advent of the YouTube or of YouTube, just I listen to lots and lots of talk stuff, and that's maybe been 10 years or whatever. But I've always been into this stuff. I've always been into art and conspiracy theories and secret societies. There's a lot of that in this as well, and and Sandy loved that stuff as well. Like I say, there's the biker gangs. There's there's definitely a whole kind of Illuminati feel to just almost like as a very light fog or Mr. Sheen on the entire Blue Oyster Cult canon. But I've always been interested. But what I liked about this is it did allow me to step out of just writing a rock book thing and use that timeline thing where it's a really fun thing to be able to write that way and just be popping stuff in all over the place, right?
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. I could say that over and over again because I'm still, like I said, I'm still reading and rereading. I think now my copy has 2 colors of highlighter over some of the same pages because I'm going back, oh yeah, there's that. And as I said, with what Todd and I are working on in the 3rd book of our Lost Future series, your book, your timeline in particular, is really helping provide us with an even finer point on the context, the historical context, but also some things that, again, going back to the use of timelines, is helping bring some more stuff to the surface that helps us make our argument. And so it just really, it's an amazing book, and I look forward to your follow-up to it. I mean, absolutely. Jumping tracks to another Blue Oyster Cult thing. I'm going to go back to that classic because I know there's folks watching and listening. I recently saw a Rick Beato video. I enjoy watching Rick Beato a lot, and he was talking with, oh my gosh, I'm doing a brain dump. One of the members of the band,
Eric Bloom.
Pardon?
Probably Buck Dharma, the guitar.
Yeah, Buck Dharma, and he was talking about the writing of "Don't Fear the Reaper." Was in the context of, I guess, was it he that had been diagnosed with a heart condition that at a young age, this is the story that's told on the Rick Beato thing, diagnosed with a heart condition at a really young age, feeling the way he put it, very mortal. And wrote that song as kind of a to uplift himself, and it's a song about death and reincarnation and a long-lasting love, that kind of thing. And then it ends up not being such a serious condition or whatever. Is that just the pretty much the story behind that song, or is there something deeper that isn't told about "Don't Fear the Reaper"?
Well, the main thing that is told that is controversial is it's kind of a teenage suicide pact song.
Yes.
The Romeo and Juliet and like death isn't so bad and come join me and all that sort of thing, right? So,
Mhm.
I'm doing another Blue Oyster Cult book on the side, which is long story. It's about panels and interviewing people who know these albums well, and just a
Yeah.
Q&A thing. But someone brought up that you couldn't get away with a song like that these days, and even the Replacements, when they wrote a suicide type song called "The Ledge," got
Yeah.
a lot of stick from MTV for doing that, right? And they wouldn't play the video or something. But
Right.
so yeah, it's definitely a song kind of in that direction. It's such a beautiful, well put together song that is so
Yeah.
different from everything they've ever done. It's very birdsy, and they never did that before, with
Right.
the arpeggiated guitar and stuff, and they never did it since, really. But the other interesting thing about Buck is that, and this I've kind of learned through the panel thing, because a few guys have said it, and I've noticed it, is that he doesn't write a lot. He's not very prolific. But when he
Mhm.
does write, it's usually the hits. And when he does write also, he's one of the few guys in the band who will also do his own lyrics. Because the other people will work with the the cabal, the consortium of the
Yeah.
VOC writers. But so he wrote that, and that made their career. And he wrote "Burnin' for You,"
Yeah.
top to
Yeah.
bottom, and that made
It's
their career. And he's got Harvest Moon on a later one is really good. And
it sounds like he's truly, genuinely, it's inspiration. It comes to him out of the ether, so to speak, which I think, you've written plenty long enough, whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, I think we've all experienced that. If you write long enough, that work that just you feel like is handed to you. And it sounds like, he, at least in the writings of the songs he did, that he's tapped into that very special place, which is similar. It's the same territory, I think, as, whatever Sandy was tapped into, when this Imaginos thing, I look at Imaginos to the extent that I know of it through your book and through the other little tidbits I've looked at online. I look at what Sandy was envisioning as what sorry, that little tone kind of. I look at that as something that was kind of brought to him, that was revealed to him, and this is why, again, I tell people, don't disregard something just because it might be packaged in a literary fictional or a theatrical or musical fictional context, because this is how sometimes. An artist or a visionary, this is the means by which they have to get the information, get the message out to, the public, or at least the members of the public out there that really need to hear it. For me, going back to Don't Fear the Reaper, as you said, its controversial nature, reputation was because, it appears to be a suicide pact song. But yet, if you really look deeper, it's to me, I think what it is you can read, and this is what makes it great, you can read your own interpretation into it, right? Which is what they say about art. In general, but another famous, I think it was controversial, suicide song was "Close My Eyes Forever" by Ozzy and Lita Ford. If you remember that one,
okay,
that was another. That's a great song, but again, controversial because of the subject matter. So
he's got another one, "Suicide Solution," right? Which
yes.
lyrics by Bob Daisley. I mean, that's a whole controversy in itself, that the bass player in the band, Bob Daisley, was writing all these lyrics. They're great lyrics on those early Ozzy albums. But "Suicide Solution" it sounds like a suicide song, but it's Bob kind of telling Ozzy, you better quit your drinking. You ain't going to make it if you drink that much, right? Sort of thing. So.
Well, I know you love synchronicities as much as I do. Randy Rhoads is buried here in San Bernardino in the same cemetery as Cora Stanton. In fact, his monument, his crypt, is right as you drive in the entrance of the cemetery. It's right there. And of course, there's an Aussie connection for you folks. But
you know that San Bernardino is actually name checked in the song called "Shadow of California" on the Revolution by Night album by Blue Oyster Cult. And "Shadow of California" is actually a true blue bona fide Imaginos song coming way later. Like, there's no Imaginos songs on Fire of Unknown Origin and a couple others. But that, down by the Cloverleaf Junction, all this, that whole thing is an Imagino song, and San Bernardino's right in it.
Well, guess what I'm going to be listening to as soon as we're done here, and picking apart each line. Thank you for that tip off. I didn't know that. That's amazing. It doesn't surprise me, because even in a comical way, through Frank Zappa, San Bernardino leaves its imprint on a lot of people that have passed through here or learned things about it. Yeah, so that's cool. I will have to. I'm going to have to give that a listen as soon as we're done here. Let me see. I know we're going to have some folks interested in asking you some questions. So I think we're at the hour point. This is a good time for me to open up to the live chat to take questions. Are you up for that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm just at a distance from the screen where
I've been glancing at those comments and loving reading them too. So.
Oh yeah, we have a lively live chat. They're great. Yeah. They're great, and I know they're enjoying this. So folks in the live chat, remember, please put them in all caps so that I can see them, because at the distance I'm sitting at, my reading glasses just make it more blurry. So if you have a question for Martin on Blue Oyster Cult, on Sandy Pearlman, on Imaginos, but particularly his book Flaming Telepaths, Imaginos Expanded and Specified. Let me show that cover again right here.
While you're watching that, Walter, I mean, I wanted to mention one of the other cool things about this whole story is the alchemical angle. Like,
yes.
Blue Oyster Cult has as many songs, arguably related to alchemy, that aren't part of the Imaginos saga, that are rife through the catalog. And so in here we've got, the Magna of Illusion is one of the central pieces in this whole thing.
Yes.
This evil mirror, and then that links us back to John Dee and Gerald Kelly and all that. And then what I've also done in here playfully is I've linked that to the Led Zeppelin, The Object, from Led Zeppelin Presence, right? And I've drawn that into some of the illustrations, because I got a really cool explanation once from the designer of Presence, Aubrey Powell, from Hypnosis, the famous design house. And he said that if you look at the Led Zeppelin album cover, the really cool thing about The Object, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? That little black, thing. It's about 8 inches tall. It's just like a little. So essentially, if you look at it on the Presence cover, it's just a black void. It doesn't have any angles to it. And the whole idea was that this literally is a black hole of a talisman that you can look into. And that's kind of what the obsidian mirror, the shoe stone, the Magna of Illusion is. You're looking into it, you're seeing angels, you're seeing the future, you're seeing the past, all that kind of thing. And that's what this Led Zeppelin thing was. But he said one of the funny things is, he said, we did some sort of a convention in Japan, and we built this Led Zeppelin object that literally was an optical illusion that was this black hole. And it's like, it was freaking people out, he said, because people would come up to it and they'd be reaching into this thing. It was almost like a hologram made out of paper and cardboard or whatever it was, right? But it was like this crazy black hole that they managed to build. And that's why I've got, the Serbian black hand, one of the guys holding one of the objects. And then when I have the Cliff House burned down, I have showing there, about a 2-story tall Led Zeppelin, The Object, as being this obsidian mirror that goes through the whole story. But that's a material part of the Imaginos story. So.
And before I get to the first question here, I meant to ask you. I'll have to save it for the next time. I was going to ask you about the black mirror in the story, specifically that it came from a pyramid in Mexico within the context of the story, and I found that to be really interesting. So, Johnny Side has a question. What can you tell us about the songs Black Blade and Godzilla?
Well, okay, so Godzilla is basically so this is what I like about this whole expanding this thing, because Godzilla can be seen as like a Lovecraftian fish monster as well, right? Sort of thing, right? But essentially, this goes back to their just love of growing up with Hammer horror and all those great, Godzilla and King Kong movies, sort of thing. It's just a fun song. It's done in a super fun way. It's got some humor to it. It's as people say, it has a built-in audience for the song because of the movie itself. It's got a really good riff. It's slow. It's still got some of the band's old rock and roll tendencies where you hear sort of honky-tonk piano in it as well, and kind of a New York girl group sort of chorus on it. So yeah, it's just a fun song. It's not particularly related to the Imaginos saga. Black Blade's got a little more richness to it. So this is the band also. Eric got together. He was a fan of Michael Moorcock, so he contacted Michael Moorcock, and they collaborated on a couple of lyrics. Black Blade is probably my second favorite Blue Oyster Cult song of all time because it's proggy and interesting and heavy, and it's got all these different parts. But it's got all that Elric of Melnibo.
Elric of, I always said Melnibone, but I might have had it wrong. And of course, with his sword Stormbringer.
Yes, so that's part of the thing. We know Deep Purple had a song called Stormbringer as well, and Michael Moorcock worked with
let's not forget that Moorcock wrote the Oswald Bastable books, Warlord of the Air, that whole alternate history with the airships and stuff. So, you got Moorcock interested in these same themes too as well.
But the nice thing is the song's called Black Blade, so it's another version of an obsidian mirror, shoestone, illusion, right? So it goes in there as well, but in this case, it's a sword that needs to keep on killing, right? Sort of thing. Right?
Yes.
It's involved in, I guess I think it's Veteran of the Psychic Wars on Fire of Unknown Origin is his other collaboration with Michael Moorcock, and they're always successful collaborations.
Okay. While we wait for the next question, I have a question. Have you considered presenting the Imaginos material in a documentary or even a narrative film?
Yeah, that would be pretty interesting. So what I find with this book is that it's almost like there are probably 36 stories in it. Like there's a lot of different stories in it, and I think it would be a real challenge to link it all up because the timeline allows it to be pretty ragged, right? Now, documentary, there actually is a very, very, very good YouTube video that's almost like 2 hours long that explains the whole Imaginos story in a more sober, correct way than I do in this book. I mean, this book is a flight of fancy, no question about it. I'm not apologizing for that or even trying to fool anybody. I mean, I'm making stuff up in this book, right? But there is this great YouTube video a guy did. I don't know who he is, but he did a really good job of it. So if you want to know the absolute, complete in detail true story, there's already a really good documentary on it.
And what is that title again? Do you know?
I actually Googled it today, and it's easily Googleable. I mean, YouTube searchable. I just put in Imaginos Explained, and it came up.
Okay.
It's I think it's an hour 43 or something like that. And it's
excellent.
Beautifully done. The guy put a lot of work into it.
I'll pull up that link and get that posted here at the Walter Bosley Channel Community tab so that folks can go to that and see it. There was something about, and it's again another one of those things I'm gonna have to save for next time probably. It was a Robert W. Chambers King in Yellow angled type of question that I had, and I lost that. Remember, folks, if you have questions, if you want me to see it, you're going to have to put it in all caps. So if you've asked a question, but I'm missing it here because the font's a little small, represent it in all caps. So
Chambers thing. So that one and Celine and Julie go boating, and Albert once mentioned Saul Bellow, Humboldt's gift. So these things are just like things that are mentioned in interviews, and so they come up and I put them in sort of thing, because they have an importance that I don't know because no one's really ever explained it. But the larger question is that this book also includes, as one of these sub narratives that you may not even notice, that the history of science fiction and the history of horror. That's why there are references to Poe and Bierce and Robert Chambers and Lovecraft in that. So it's almost like Sandy smartly had the building blocks to be able to do this story as sparse as it is, because he has this history and this intellectual curiosity. He's a smart guy. He's essentially, if you want to know his personality, he's like a mad professor, because that's what he became later in life. He was a professor, but he also even managed Blue Oyster Cult and managed Black Sabbath for a brief time. He's the producer of the second Clash album. Give him enough rope. I mean, he's done some really interesting things.
Yeah.
But and not, including all of these lyrics and being co-producer of these Blue Oyster Cult albums with Murray Krugman or whoever. So he had, but I think he also had a lot of projects that his mind was moving too fast on that never got finished and stuff like that. And he was a little scattered in all these different multidisciplinary pursuits. But I think one of his lasting things, well, this is one of his lasting things for sure, but one of the things that he spent the most time on was being a prof and being a music theory prof and having all these great wild theories about classical music being the original heavy metal and how this manifests in what he wanted to do with Blue Oyster Cult.
We're buffering. Okay. I came back. We lost Mark. Oh, there he is. You still with us?
Yeah, still with you.
We had just a momentary weird lapse in.
I didn't see
go ahead and finish your thought again.
Right through it, so.
Okay. Yeah. Well, like I said, I definitely want to have you back to talk more about this and other things that you do. Let me go through here and see if we have any more questions. I think what's going to happen here is that the viewers here, they're going to probably rush out to read your book, and then the next time I have you on, believe me, they're going to be full of tons of questions, because that's how they do things here. They go out and they follow through, they read the material, and then they come back with a bunch of intelligent questions that just really make you think about your own work, levels and depths that you might not have seen yourself. So that's what I like about these guys here, particularly here we have looks like we have let me see what we got. It's Johnny's side. I was always told that the Blue Oyster Cult logo was an alchemy symbol. I know you touched on it. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about that logo is that sort of history has built it up over the years, and maybe, sometimes this is the band, saying things out of turn and they don't even know the right answer, but there is the link with Saturn, there is the link with Kronos, there is the link with alchemy. But if you Google that image, like if you put in Blue Oyster Cult logo and hit images on Google, or Saturn, this is what I meant. If you Google Kronos logo or Saturn logo, this logo doesn't come up. And I was just noticing, you forget some of these things over time, but I believe Albert is pretty adamant, or maybe it was Sandy, and maybe it was in that Imaginos video, but somebody said that Golic made that thing up. Bill Golic made that thing up. So that's pretty incredible. I mean, this Golic guy is quite a mysterious character, and like I say, he never did anything besides those first couple of album covers, which are interpretable in so many strange ways as well. The black and white, the austere, this, and then again, this reference to Albert Speer, City of the Future, right?
Yeah.
It's just something maybe Sandy told me once, and now everybody thinks that's what it is. And then years go by and people say, apparently it had to do with that, right?
Yeah.
There's only one mention or whatever, right?
Yeah. That is an interesting story about that artist, and he just kind of did he disappear, or was it this that they lost contact with him and they know what happened with him, or is he a mystery?
He's a bit of a mystery. He became a cab driver. They looked they followed him for a few years, but they even have a deeper mystery. They have this Phil King guy. Phil
Okay.
King was an agent who was and helping him get on the radio, and maybe he was part roadie or something, but he got into some gambling situation and was supposedly murdered by the mob. And I think I've seen the actual story where he was chased up the street somewhere and he ran up to a house and he was killed then or whatever. But so Blue Oyster Cult, don't let a good story go to waste. Like there are little traces of this Phil King story that show up through the catalog. There's this great song called Deadline, which kind of tells a little bit of the Phil King story, and he's mentioned in a couple other places. And there's a parallel story. It's a crazy story of that they say has reflections of the Phil King thing, but it's not really about Phil King, where they've got this early song called The Last Days of May, or Then Came the Last Days of Yeah, I think it's Then Came the Last Days of May. But this is a story that they saw, I think, in a local Long Island newspaper, where there were some kids from maybe even high school kids or college, but they worked out this big drug deal, and they drive out west, and they follow the car out into the desert. And what happens? The drug dealers kill them and keep the drugs and the money, right? So yeah, there's this, and like just such a creepy little strange story. It's just this lyric on an early Blue Oyster Cult album, but so much can be read into that. And then you take that and kind of work it into, whoa, where does that fit in the Imagino story? But,
Right.
Yeah, it's basically an ambush where these kids naively thought they were doing this kind of big, glamorous drug deal. They drive out west. We hear the air is fine, that dry this time of year, and they go out there and get lured out in the desert, and that's the end. I think one of them survives or something. But yeah,
wow.
So and throughout, again, you could probably pick about 7 or 8 topics. Blue Oyster Cult has these little crime vignettes all throughout the whole thing. I mean, later they have John Shirley, the science fiction writer, writes a song called See You in Black, where there's this guy that actually they have 2 songs about a guy getting out of jail and wanting to take revenge on the people. But even in this See You in Black song, it sounds a little bit like this gal is hooking up with a guy who's just getting out of jail. But the whole missive of the See You in Black is I'd like to see you in black because that means that your husband is dead.
Oh, yeah.
Noir thing to say, right?
There's some symbol. I think unless it exists already, Martin, I think what you got in your hands here is a gold mine in a genre that I think you could create and go forward with, and that's heavy metal or metal noir. Is there such a thing yet? Because that seems like a good genre there. Metal noir is what it sounds like Blue Oyster Cult was doing.
That does not exist.
It does now, and folks, you heard it here first. The Walter Bosley channel, thanks to Martin Popoff, the genre is yours to kick off there, Martin. Metal noir, I like that.
Yeah, very cool.
So, let's see if we got any more questions, folks. Again, all caps. Let me see. Oh, okay, here we go. I think here's another one from Johnny's side. Did I already hit this one? Veteran of the Psychic Wars is my favorite Blue Oyster Cult song, featured on the heavy metal movie soundtrack. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so what happened, there's a bunch of songs on Fire of Unknown Origin, which were written by the band enthusiastically because, hey, we've got this opportunity to be on the heavy metal movie soundtrack album.
Right.
And so they wanted to be like one of the central bands on it, but as it turned out, they only got the one song on it. It's very similar to the Black Sabbath Mob Rules story. Actually, it's not truly, it's similar because Sandy Pearlman was managing both bands at the same time. They went on tour as Black and Blue and all this. But anyways, Black Sabbath got a song called Mob Rules on the album. Blue Oyster Cult gets this on there. But they also write a song called Heavy Metal, the Black and Silver, which is on Fire of Unknown Origin, not on the heavy metal soundtrack. And that's like a straightforward alchemical heavy metal. That was another big thing with Sandy. He was always equating and loving just talking about heavy metal as an alchemical process, right? And I reference that in this book playfully here and there. You're mixing the strings together and the electricity and this metal with that metal and the alloys and the pickups and all that, and it's called heavy heavy metal. So there's all that as well. But so that one, and I think I think possibly Soul Survivor. There's one other one, not Fire of Unknown Origin, but essentially they tried to write a few songs for it and only the one got on, but they had these ones left over, and people call it a little bit of a criticism of that album, that it, it's maybe a little disjointed because it's a semi-concept album, but it's a great album. It was a huge album for them because of Burning for You.
Excellent. Well, let me see here. I think that's it for now with the questions from the live chat. Martin, I really thank you for coming here and spending some time and talking with me. This has been a real treat. I sincerely appreciate it.
Oh, it's been a blast. It's been a lot of fun, and like I say, a lot of the inspiration came from you in the first place.
Again, believe me, I'm humbled and flattered because wow. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I definitely want to have you back on to talk more about Flaming Telepaths, to talk about the next book. Where can everybody here find your books and your videos, and where are you out there in the internet world?
Well, this particular book is only available at my website, martinpopoff.com. And every book that I have in print is available from me. It's one of the main ways I have an income, is being a mail order guy of my own books.
Excellent.
So they're there with PayPal address, for US, international, Canada. I sign them all, ship them out from here. And most of my books that are through publishers are the usual channels. But I do buy a quantity of every book that I have in print. So that's all martinpopoff.com. I got the audio podcast, History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff, 190 episodes now, haven't missed a week. Got the video channel, Contrarians. Yeah, that's about it. I'm on Pete Pardo's Sea of Tranquility every Friday morning, just talking about music. But yeah, in terms of this stuff, there isn't anything besides this book in terms of this stuff, but there will be a follow-up. So
Cool. You know what? We had, I think, a last question pop up here that we'll throw at you.
I see 3 more actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess finally they're catching up here. We had a bit of a, let's see. Crypto Alchemist asked, has Martin ever gone into Sir Isaac Newton's recently released alchemy writings?
No, I haven't. And I see you ask, have I done any alchemy experiments in the lab? No, I just love looking up all this alchemy stuff and putting it all in here because I just love the way that it's so I love the way that it marries. Like I say, there are alchemy songs in Oyster Cult. There's Imagino songs. There's not really a mix, but you can mix it together because Sandy was so into all of this as well. And as Walter, as you know, I mean, alchemy just you can just go so many directions with it.
Yeah.
Because is it a science? Is it an occult thing? Is it a religion? Right? It's pseudoscience. It's astrology. It's all these things all mixed together. Right? Kind of thing. So alchemy is just a good catch-all for a lot of fun.
Sure. Yeah. There's all sorts of different kinds of alchemy, of course. That what we're talking about, occult social alchemy, basically, is the big umbrella that this falls under. Well, again, Martin, thank you. I really appreciate you being here. I look forward to having you back again. And thanks again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we do this anytime you want. So
okay.
Very cool.
I'm going to take you up on that.
Okay.
So cool. Well, you have yourself a good evening, and you'll definitely be hearing from me to come back on here.
Sounds good. Should I sign right off?
Yeah. I think I've kept you an hour and a half. I don't like to take up any more time than that.
I just meant that. Did you want to keep me after you hit stop or whatever? Are we done?
Do
you even know how to do that?
I think what we'll do is we'll end it here, and then I'm just going to give them some announcements, and then I'm going to be out of here too. So,
okay.
So you have a good night, and you'll be hearing from me again soon. And also, I'm going to have a bunch of questions. Like I said, when Todd and I are pulling more threads on our next book, I think you might be interested in some of those threads we're pulling. So I'll be talking with you about that too.
All right.
All righty. Have a good night. Thanks again.
Bye now.
Let me see. Oh, there we go. Okay, guys. I'll tell you, that was wow. This was an interview that I was really looking forward to doing, because I'm telling you guys, contact Martin, get this book. Particularly if if you're into my Empire of the Wheel books and the things that Todd and I are writing on the Lost Future series, you are really going to enjoy this book. I know that I'm going to be going back pouring through more Blue Oyster Cult music and the things that Martin shared with us, and it's just incredible, really really good threads. So again, I really appreciated Martin coming on here and just sharing these things with us for all of you as well. So we will probably be back later this week with another on-site grim scene investigation episode. There's some exciting things happening over there that Malia will be, I'm sure, announcing to you guys fairly soon. And don't forget about the shop. That's right. That's right. We have activated the shop at lostcontinentlibrary.com. You guys got to get over there. There's some cool items, and those are just the initial items that we're offering. Okay, so get over there, lostcontinentlibrary.com. The shop button is there. Check it out. You're especially, I think, going to like the supporter polo shirts with the logo. There's a cool trucker hat with the logo, and there's a Kaleidoscope Grimoire t-shirt over there. And I'm going to be on tonight with Dave Scott over at his show there, probably talking about these recent shoot downs of military intelligence surveillance platforms. No, they're not ET saucers, folks. There's a lot of that spin going around, and in my opinion, it's nonsense. But, the ET hypothesis people are going to just take full advantage of that. But that, and let's see, I will be on Into the Fringe Thursday night. So, jump on over there and come on over and listen and watch me and Cardinal Sin yapping about stuff that we find interesting, as usual. And yeah, so we will be back. I'll be back. We'll be back this coming Sunday at the usual live stream time at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard here at the Walter Bosley channel on YouTube. And I'll be announcing who the guest will be later this week. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Always, I look forward to these a lot. So anyway, thank you guys for watching, and thanks for the great questions from the live chat. You guys all take it easy, and I will see you next time. And I don't think I forgot anything, did I? Nope, that's it. So, good night.